This is how the lyrics differ from the O Island in the Sun.
Well, who are some of your influences?
Well, I think my biggest influence is Marcus Garvey, Haile Selassie. Sure.
From what you heard coming up as a boy about Garvey, or what you've learned now that you're grown, or what?
What we hear, what we read, you know, and what we know about him.
Did you learn much about Garvey in school?
No.
Yeah.
Yes, them don't teach. It's the education that we don't get in school, you know. We don't get that type of education that when we grow up we can know who we is. We get a more education that we might know who Christopher Columbus is, how Marco Polo is, you know. We never really know who Marcus Garvey is, who Haile Selassie is, how any black man is.
Tell them, Bob, tell them.
Were you born as a Rasta?
Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican who had traveled all over the black world, and he was born in the late 19th century. He traveled to Panama, to Costa Rica, to London, and throughout the Caribbean. And everywhere he traveled, he found that people of African descent were oppressed, that they were held back from exercising the power and authority and economic independence that other groups had enjoyed. And so he was inspired to do something about it. He wanted to come to the United States to work with Booker T. Washington, who was the most prominent African-American internationally known. He was the principal of Tuskegee Institute, which trained African-Americans to be...
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Good afternoon, kings and queens, prince and princesses. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. This is a God-blessed day. This is another God-given day, and we, as usual, thank our God for this day, for this time. Today, family, we're going to be doing the program a little bit different. We're going to be approaching the show a little bit different. We're taking a different approach. We're going to be putting, just for this show, we're going to be putting aside the political commentary. And we are going to be honoring and speaking about and paying tribute to one of our ancestors, one of our era, one of the iconic person that we as a race, we as a black people, or we as people, period, recognize and honor. We are talking about the late, great, honorable Sir Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Marcus Mosiah Garvey. For those of you who ain't aware, and for those of you who ain't fully aware, this past Saturday, which was the 17th, it was the birth strong of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It was the birth strong of our brother, our teacher, our ancestor, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And if he was alive, should he be alive, he would have attained the age of 132 years. However, he's not, and for the works and sacrifice that this warrior did on behalf of me personally, on behalf of the black masses, behalf of black people throughout the diaspora, we gonna use this first hour in the show to pay tribute to someone who deserves such an honor. We're gonna use this first hour, family, to pay our respects, to show our respects and our gratitude to Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Now, look, for those of you who may or may not, for those of you who may or may not know, Marcus Mosiah Garvey holds a very special place in my heart, a very special place. And one of the reasons why I'm so proud of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, not only for his contribution to mankind, not only for his contribution towards the race, but Marcus Mosiah Garvey family comes from the very same place that I came from, the same landmass. He was governed by the same people who govern my family. He's a Jamaican born, just like myself, and that give me and that even let me, when I speak about Marcus Garvey, I speak about Marcus Garvey with such pride in my voice, knowing that this little 5'4" stumpy barefoot boy from Jamaica could make such an impact on humanity, such an impact on the race. We honor, we pay tribute to our brother, to our ancestor, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Now, the second part of the show, family, the second part of the show, the second hour, we are going to utilize it to, and look, this is a show, let me tell you from now. This is a show, today's show is a show wherein, if you never called this show before, or if you was hesitant in calling the show, you don't have to be today. Today is a day where you can call in, more so if you are a victim or a resident of Hurricane Katrina. Today is a day in which you can call in. You don't have to give your name. You can just tell us what your present status is as it relates to this post-Katrina era. And you can even tell us if you wish to share the pre-Katrina era. You can tell us your experience about Katrina, your opinion, and if you see significant amount of progress. You can share. This is one day you can call in. Look, you don't have to be afraid that, again, we ain't talking about political correctness today. Today is not that day. We're putting that just for today, family. Look, just for today. We have to pay respect and tribute to the ancestors, and we have to show love to our fellow New Orleans, our fellow Louisians. Okay? The second hour, we're going to be using that just in reference our memory to the victims, to those who lost their life in Katrina, to those who right now going through some mental disorder just because they are affected or just because of the aftermath of Katrina. And I would appreciate it very much if you guys could call in. Again, the telephone number is 504-303-8922. That's 504-303-8922. Now look, if you call and someone is on the line, don't worry, because it depends on the amount of calls that come in today. I'll be moving it along so people can actually, you can actually share your experience with everyone. All right. Again, the first hour is to our ancestor.
Be more efficient farmers, more efficient workers, and Garvey wanted to work with Washington to figure out how to create an organization in Jamaica that was as influential for Black Americans as Tuskegee was. So Garvey was someone who really felt that African Americans should struggle to improve their condition economically and socially, and that they should work together to do this. And Garvey was less interested in fighting for equal rights, of trying to integrate into white American society. Garvey was known, and has been known, as a black nationalist, and Malcolm X's parents were followers of Marcus Garvey. Garvey tried to establish an organization for the uplift and advancement of black people in Jamaica. It didn't really take off, and so Garvey went to the United States. When he had hoped to meet with Booker T. Washington, but Washington unfortunately passed away before Garvey could work with him, and so Garvey founded his own organization in Harlem in around 1917. Garvey founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and this organization took off. It inspired many African Americans in the North, in the South. It inspired many immigrants from the Caribbean to Harlem and to the United States. And it was the largest mass movement, mass organization ever founded. It was the largest black mass organization that had ever existed before then or since. And Garvey's influence throughout the black world was tremendous. There were Garveyite branches of his organization throughout Africa, throughout West and Southern Africa, and the colonial powers in Africa really saw the popularity of Garvey's movement with its message of Africa for the Africans as a threat to British and French colonial rule. And so there was quite a bit of surveillance and persecution of Africans who had Garveyite materials in their possession. Garvey dreamed huge dreams for Africans and for people of African descent. He really felt that black peoples, if they cooperated internationally, could wield power that was comparable to the power wielded by Europeans. And this was a message that was very inspiring for many black Americans, including Malcolm X's parents.
Great is the Lord and the company of him who established Zion and dirt, cause your light to shine and justice sound, yo.
Rastafari!
Marcus Garvey was the first black man to come into this country and get a mass movement, an allegiance, support of the masses of black people. Why? Because Garvey didn't care what the white man thought. Garvey didn't care how the white man felt. Garvey had the feelings of the black man at heart. Garvey had the hopes and aspirations of the black man at heart. And the black masses detected this. They felt this. They were conscious of this. So they gave Garvey their support. And anyone today who can get a following among the masses of black people in this country is immediately labeled by the United States government as un-American, as seditious, as subversive, as Marcus Garvey was labeled un-American, as seditious and subversive. Any black man who has the true intention of solving the problem of the masses of black people in this country, the government itself will try and trick that man and trap that man and frame that man. And usually he'll do it by these Uncle Tom Negro leaders whom the government has set up. The Negro intellectual was against Garvey. The Negro professional was against Garvey because Garvey represented the black man.
The black man.
You're quite hostile.
I got a right to be hostile, man. My people being persecuted.
The prophet, man. Marcus Garvey tell that we must look to the east.
Bob Marley.
A lot of things
Bob Marley family.
And a lot of it come to pass. Some still live, and everyone see it. I mean, get more stronger. You know, in reality. As everything when say them time happened today, and everyone see it happening. Well played.
It's simple. And the solution hasn't changed since Marcus Garvey articulated it over 100 years ago. And the solution is independence in all areas of human endeavor. The solution for African people is no different than the solution for Chinese people. The solution for African people is no different than the solution for the French people. It's the same. It's no secret. It's not hidden under a rock. We have to do what everyone else has done, and as build ourselves up independently, economically, educationally, spiritually, socially, politically. We must become a power base, which we are not, as we are today, with all of our doctors, with all of our college-educated folks, with all of our black capitalistic business owners who are only looking to get rich themselves but do nothing to raise the general economic condition of black people. We are still a race of dependents. If you live in France, you're dependent on the French government for this and for that. You're dependent on white business. Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Africa for the Africans. It is hoped when the time comes for Americans and West Indian Negroes to settle in Africa, they will realize their responsibility and their duty. New York City, April 18, 1922. The Negro world. The philosophy and opinions of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. To provide your basic needs. America, it's the same thing. Africa, it's the same thing. Wherever we are dependent on the white power structure where we live. There's 4 institutions that you must have in order to be considered an independent community. We don't have them nowhere in space and time at the same time. A hospital to protect African life. A supermarket, okay, for nutrition to preserve African life. Education to prepare the next generation of African children for the role that they must play in the freedom struggle. And number 4, a bank to finance the building of infrastructure and institutions and organizations and programs where we live. You cannot find those 4 things totally owned by African people anywhere on the face of the earth, but we will call ourselves free. There's 2 types of freedom. There's a F-R-E-E-D-O-M, and there's an F-R-E-E-D-U-M-B. White people have the freedom. We have the freedom because we're too politically uneducated to recognize that it doesn't matter if you can drive a Mercedes. It doesn't matter if you can live in a white suburb. It doesn't matter if your black child can go to a white school. At the end of the day, what do you
Garveyites, family. Garveyites.
What do you produce? What do you distribute? Marcus Garvey said, a race without power and authority is a race without respect. A race that doesn't respect itself automatically forfeits the respect of other people. So you say, where do we begin? 2 things. Education and economics. Okay. It's going to be hard to break the psychological chains of slavery. As long as just about everyone in this room
is greater than the law. If justice was not included in the law, then the law would be of no use to us as human beings. I ask no mercy, I ask no sympathy. I ask for justice. You may condemn the body, but not the soul. God condemns the soul. Judge me, and God will judge you. Justice is greater than the law. Justice, I know, and I know you too believe in time, but we shall wait patiently for 200 years if need be to face our enemies through our posterity. In life or death I shall come back to serve even as I served before. In life I shall be the same. In death I shall be a terror to the foes of African liberty. If death has power, then count on me to be the real Marcus Garvey I would like to be. If I may come in an earthquake or a cyclone or a plague or pestilence or as God would have me, then be assured that I shall never desert you and make your enemies triumph over you. Justice is greater than the law. Look for me in the world when there are storm. Look for me all around you, for I shall come back and bring with me countless millions of black slaves who have died in America, who have died in the West Indies, and millions who have died in Africa to aid you in the fight for liberty, freedom, justice. I know that there are certain people who do not like me because I am black. You can enslave, as was done for 300 years, the bodies of men. You can shackle the hands of men. You can shackle the feet of men. You can...
The selected writings and speech of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Selected writing and speech of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. The hidden spirit of America. History recalls we're a race of slaves through evolutions thought process has risen to the heights where they ruled and dominate those who once enslaved them. Liberty Hall, New York City, February 13, 1922. The Negro World. The philosophy and opinions of Marcus
and imprison the bodies of men, but you cannot shackle or imprison the minds of men. Justice is greater than the law.
Great is the Lord and the company of him who established Zion in the earth. Cause your light to shine and justice sound, yeah.
Rasta!
The black race is one of the branches of the human race. As a section of humanity, he occupies a position in the world at the present time most unfavorable and most uncomfortable. The black people are subjects of ostracism. It is sad that our humanity has shown us no more love, no greater sympathy than we are experiencing. Wheresoever you go throughout the world, the black man is discarded, is ostracized, is relegated to the lowest in things, social, political, and economical. This therefore suggests a problem and one that must be solved. We in this section of the world are not entirely free from this unkind, unsympathetic, and uncharitable behavior of the groups or races around us. But since man has been placed on his own responsibility, whether he be black, white, or yellow, he must act on his own account. We will not unduly whine or complain, but reason among ourselves and see what can be done to remedy this state of affairs. Life is a conflict. You have to fight your way through it whether you will it or not. Those of us who are able to fight most stubbornly live, accomplish most, and to them go the laurels, the palms, and triumph of our civilization and world.
In memory of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, we continue to pay tribute to our ancestors, to our loved one, to our teacher. This past Saturday, for those of you who don't know, if this brother was alive, if this son was alive, if this father was alive, he would have attained the age of 132. Our ancestor, we pay homage, we pay respect. Marcus Mosiah Garvey.
I'm great. It's truly an honor to be here, to be a part of this really important, illustrious event. Marcus Garvey's legacy is still being explored and understood in really important ways. It's hard to speak of Garvey in 10 minutes, because to speak of Garvey is to speak of the black world in the 1920s.
Yes, sir.
To speak of Garvey is to speak about ideas of back to Africa, Pan-Africanism, that extends in the 19th century. To speak of Garvey is to talk about African resistance to systems of enslavement. Garvey himself would say he was a descendant of the Maroons. To speak of Garvey is to speak of black thought, of black men and black women that transfers into the 20th century, but it's these older ideas. Garvey's genius was his ability to build the world's most expensive black mass movement of the likes we have never seen since. The Negro World, for example, this amazing document, this newspaper that's not only written in English, but also French and Spanish, travels across the world as contraband material, which speaks to the assault on Garvey and the literature of Garvey and Garveyites for speaking about black unity, for speaking about the need for black people, like other populations across the world, had a right to self-determination. Some of these ideas will come during the civil rights struggle, will come through as commonplace ideas that organizations like the United Nations would speak for, the right of colonized peoples to have freedom. This is what Garvey was speaking about. The UNIA was this amazing organization. One of the reasons because it was family-based. It had a juvenile wing, very family organization that spread across the world, not just United States. Cuba, for example, had the most branches of the UNIA outside the United States. Within America, while the UNIA is seen as a New York-based African-American idea, or West Indian idea, is really much more expensive. Louisiana actually had the most chapters of the UNIA in America. Garvey hasn't reached Africa. You see UNIA chapters being formed in Southern Africa and being attacked by the apartheid-like regimes, also in what would now be Rhodesia living right now is Zimbabwe. Garvey reaches Australia. In 1920, Fred Maynard forms an organization called the Aborigine Australian Progressive Association, very much on the lines of the UNIA. They had tried to form a branch in Sydney through correspondence with Amy Jacques Garvey, who, when we speak of Garvey, must also be mentioned, as well as the number of other Garveyites who were also assaulted by the state and couldn't travel. They had passports revoked, visas denied, all these things that we look at now as being an assault on the rights of human beings. But the UNIA became this organization that these tactics of denial and assault are being practiced on in some way. As we know, the FBI's first black informant was used to infiltrate the UNIA, and the tactics that we used to attack UNIA were really out of bounds. But it's not unexpected, because the Garvey movement had this really phenomenal ability to galvanize black energy, black ideas for freedom. But back to Australia. This speaks to me to a lot about why Garvey was so powerful. The Aborigine Progressive Association took its motto, one God, one aim, one destiny, which we know now that's Garvey. Through Garvey, we see people galvanizing around the attacks on Ethiopia by Italy in the 1930s, particularly through Garvey's paper, The Black Man. When we heard the words of Bob Marley, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, for none but ourselves can free our minds, that's a straight quote from Marcus Garvey. His legacy has been ever present. Garvey's fueled so many other organizations, from the Nation of Islam, people like Septima Clark, this phenomenal educator in Louisiana, or South Carolina rather, speaks about seeing a Black Star Line coming into Charleston harbors in the 1920s and being really blown and transformed by this process. We still have Garveyites in places like Costa Rica, still remember this promised ship that entered this space. Garvey still lives with us in many ways, and so I think this event is really important, not just for the historical dynamic of how I look at Garvey, but as was stated, it's now a time to right the wrongs. Decades of scholarship, and there's a re-emergence of Garvey studies that is understanding the impact of Garvey across the world, clearly attests to the fact that this was a movement of liberation, this was a movement of legitimized struggle that should be seen as such. If we can speak of these things openly and have conferences on the UNIA, a multitude of books, scholars winning all kinds of prestigious awards for Garvey, then we should also address some of these same issues, I think, from a legal perspective. I think I'll end my comments with that. Thank you so much.
We unfortunately have not been trained nor educated in the truths of life, paradoxically so. May I say something to you to give you a true knowledge of yourself and life, so that the same glory and success attained by other men who understand themselves may be yours? Man in the full knowledge of himself is a superb and supreme creature of creation. When man becomes possessor of the knowledge of himself, he becomes master of his environment, the captain of his own ship, the director of his own destiny, the accomplisher of his own ends. Man should understand himself because man is full of knowledge, and this knowledge is a gift of nature. When Mother Nature created man, she deprived him of nothing. He was given the faculty of understanding all things around him, and this faculty for understanding has not been taken away from him. None of his senses have been taken away from him. So there is no excuse for the black man in lacking the knowledge that man is used to beautify the world and produce all that he needs for his happiness and civilization.
Great is the Lord and the company of him who established Zion in dirt. Cause your light to shine and justice sound, yo.
Look the world over, and whatever you see in it that is pleasing to man, contributing to man's comfort, to his needs and to his satisfaction, it is but the work of man. Man blessed with the knowledge of himself and the understanding of all things around him. If you are able to live with the knowledge of yourself and with the greater knowledge of nature, you must know what is good and what is not. You must know what is finite. You must know that which is material, physical, and otherwise is at your disposal to create or otherwise use. If we leave America and go over to the east to Japan, they will be telling their fellow citizens of Japan of the wonderful accomplishments of the Japanese people, proving that man is moving onward as time moves on. But you have hated yourselves as you have done in previous years. You have shown malice, prejudice, and hate to each other. And the result is that while other races have made progress, while India has made progress towards nationalism, while Ireland has made progress towards republicanism, while the whole world has made progress in man's accomplishments, you still stand fighting yourselves, dishonoring yourselves, showing no disposition toward that higher life so that you will be abundantly blessed. I hope that you will so reflect and think that you were created for some purpose other than exhibiting malice toward your neighbor or fellow men of your own race. What a pity it is that we cannot stand united.
Let a man lose his confidence in his people and in his God, and echo is usher in an anchor sweep. The world and human society be destroyed. Liberty Hall, New York City, February 11th, 1921. The Negro World, the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Again, family, you are tuned in to The Proven Truth. You are listening to The Proven Truth with your brother, Anthony Brown. Today, we are honoring the life, the work, the birthday, the sacrifice of this great man, this great leader, this great philosopher, this great teacher, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We take this time to show our love, to pay gratitude, to recognize that here it was, this little barefoot boy from St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica, the land of my birth, had such a significant impact onto mankind, had such a significant impact to so many lives. Here it is, this little barefoot boy from Jamaica came here to America, seeing the exploitation, seeing the degradation, seeing the injustice, seeing the fact that not only in Jamaica or in the Caribbean or in Europe, but right here in America, black people at the time wasn't treated like we are human beings, wasn't treated with respect nor dignity. Now, family, I have to be honest with you. I ain't gonna lie to you. Why? Because I love you so much. I love you, my brother and sister, so much I won't lie to you. Part of me is glad that our ancestor, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, is no longer with us. Listen to what I'm saying carefully. A part of me is glad that Marcus Garvey ain't here no more. Why? Because if he was, he would be disappointed with us as a race. If he was, he would be disappointed to know all the sacrifice and all the work that he put in to educate or to inform us, to give us some type of pride within ourselves, and to see what we have become. He would be disappointed to know that there is still today certain bushwhacky Negroes, certain uppity Negroes who think that they are better than some of us, who think that they have arrived. Hence, they can leave the cause behind. He would be disappointed to know that in today's time and age, we now have black people. Listen to what I'm saying. We now have black people in prominent positions and offices treating us, treating other black people like how the European whites was treating blacks back in the days.
Did without a written law. There is no written law compelling other races to stand together. They are brought together by the gentle touch of nature. The unwritten law of nature causes them to stand together on all occasions. So wheresoever you find them in the field, that one gentle touch of nature causes them to stand together, if need be, die together. But with the black man, you can preach to him from the pulpits, you lecture from the platforms, from the byways and the hedges, the spirit of cooperation, but he will not cooperate. You talk to him gently, you try talking harshly to him, he still will not cooperate. The result is that he falls prey to those who understand themselves and walk through the world making you their serfs and slaves. You must acquire an understanding of yourselves. Look around you. See the smiling pictures of nature, the beautiful hedges, the wonderful mountains, the wonderful vegetation all around. But because of your disposition to each other, you live in suffering, in want, in penury, and in debt. You lack the gentle touch of nature, love for each other. You hate yourselves. Black men, and what is wrong with you? Why have you no affection for yourselves? Could I hope to see you living among yourselves as the people I've spoken of? Living in charity, love, and in sympathy with each other? It can be done. I wonder if you will adapt that course. Isn't it easier to enjoy prosperity than to live in ignorance and darkness? Why select the worst out of nature? Nature never gave pain, suffering, and death to the world. It was man himself who selected death, pain, and sorrow. I wonder if I cannot inspire you to select between good and evil. Let me impress upon you once again that whatsoever your hardships may be, whatsoever your difficulties in life, they are your own selection. And so if you encourage them, if you husband them and take them to your bosom, they will abide with you. Nature will not take them away from you as Mother Nature did not give them to you.
The last speech before he was incarcerated, the last speech before this great ancestor, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, was put into jail in Georgia. We are not fighting America. We are fighting hypocrisy and lies. My brothers and sisters, this was written, or these are words that was spoken by this prophet many years ago, before I was even born, before my mommy met my daddy and they do the thing and get me. Way before then. This elder statesman write these words or make this assumption or make this speech. And these words are applicable today. We are facing this system of lies and hypocrisy as was our ancestors. Again, we are not fighting America. We are fighting hypocrisy and lies. And that we will fight to the bitter end. Oh, we love Marcus Mosiah Garvey so much. Oh, we honor this ancestors so much. And that we will fight to the bitter end. Now, for all of you who ask me why I am so aggressive with these politicians or with these so-called elected officials here in the territory of Louisiana, and where do I get my courage from? Let me read this to you one more time. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, last speech before incarceration in Tom's prison. We are not fighting America. We are not fighting the government. We are not fighting elected officials. We are fighting hypocrisy and lies. And that we will fight to the bitter end. Liberty Hall, New York City, June 17, 1923. The philosophy and opinions of Marcus Mosiah Garvey.
She is not responsible for your sorrows. Mother Nature represents all that is beautiful. She gave you the highest personality in the realm divine. Your sorrows are your own. If you want joy, if you want sunshine, it is before you abundantly in nature. I made a selection of sunshine, the beautiful sunshine. I made a selection to laugh with the moon, to laugh with the stars, and sing with the birds of the forest and of the wilderness, to join in the rhythmic music of the winds that sing from east to west and from north to south. Had I selected sorrow, I would have been dead a long time ago and been without that which would send me into the presence of the divine, because I would have lived not with the knowledge that is divine. We must acquire the higher knowledge of life.
Great is the Lord and the company of him who established Zion in dirt. Cause your light to shine and justice sound, yo.
Rastafari.
We must acquire the higher knowledge of life. Black men and black women, will you get the knowledge that the white man has that causes him to be leaders and masters in the world? They're not gods with a peculiar source for understanding the world around them. They have only given expression to the knowledge of their humanity and been able to use and conquer all to their satisfaction and glory. And that is why they are always greater than you in every community that you find them.
This ancestor, this teacher, this philosopher, this brother, yes, like many other historians or many other who came after him, the fight for Marcus Garvey start from a racial aspect. It started from a racial aspect. He recognized that there was a big difference with the pigmentation of his skin compared to those people over there. He recognizes that, and he saw that as an issue, and he saw that was the reason why black people was treated in such a deplorable way, or without dignity. He recognized that. However, as I try to inform people on a day-to-day basis that, look, Marcus Garvey, unlike these so-called leaders of today, don't only speak about human rights issue, about civil rights issue. Just like myself, we care less about goddamn civil rights issue. The fight for us is of human rights. Human rights. That's the platform upon which we tend to push our argument and our fight. You can keep your goddamn civil rights. We don't want that. We don't want your civil rights. We don't want any rights that is given because of the political establishment. We don't want that. We are human beings. The same rights that any other race claim to have or claim to born with. We of African descent, we of Africans, we black people have the same right that the white man have, that the Chinese man have, that the European have, what the Jews have. It's the same right we have. And that's the basis on which we lay our argument. You can keep your goddamn civil rights. The principles of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. The UNIA stands for the bigger brotherhood. The UNIA stands for human rights. Did you catch that, family? The principles of the United Negro Improvement Association. Quote, the UNIA stands for the bigger brotherhood. The UNIA stands for human rights, not only for the Negroes, but for all race. Liberty Hall, New York City, November 25th, 1922.
Isn't it strange that wheresoever the white man is found, he takes precedence over you? Why is that so? Answer that for yourselves, black men and black women. Wheresoever you come in contact with the white man, you always have to go down in defeat before him. Whether it be in England, in France, or in America, you always have to go down to the white man, and yet he has 2 eyes, 2 feet, 2 hands, same passions, same senses and feelings as you have. Your feet are not put on opposite sides, nor your hands turned around the other way. But it's because you fail to use your will, your knowledge, and your mental faculty to the point where you will enjoy life around you. I'm only here and not in the gutters and in the pond of despair because I use my intelligence. And I swear that no man alive shall ever use his intelligence in understanding the works of nature more than I. I shall rise as high as he ascends. I shall meet him on the same platform of mental equality and fight him till thy kingdom come, because nature created us equal. I want you to make up your minds as I've made up my mind years ago. Make up your mind that you will rise to the knowledge of your soul. Because of your ignorance, you cannot understand and decide between good and evil. You don't know whether you're doing right or wrong. With a greater knowledge of life, you're able to appreciate all things around you.
Great is the Lord and the company of him who established Zion in the earth. Cause your light to shine and justice sound, yo.
Rastafari.
I'm able to gather you here because I understand you. Understand your neighbor, your wife, your children, and you will be able to live in harmony with each other and get the best out of life. The early Africans were able to be the fathers of our civilization because they persevered in their object. When we hear the civilization of the Alexandrias, of the Timbuktus, the creation of the black man in the early ages, do we realize that the civilization we now enjoy was handed down to the present century? But the black man went back to sleep and is still sleeping. We are trying to awaken you to the true consciousness of yourselves. You young black men, you young black women, may we not appeal to you knowing you as we do to turn over a new leaf, rejecting the ignorance, the foolishness, the childishness that has been your part for these many years. We have looked into your faces, you growing manhood, the rising generation, and no serious thought can we see registered on your countenance but the thought of vulgarity.
You are not going to Africa like the Pilgrim Fathers came to America. Nobody invite them to America. Liberty Hall, New York City, June 4th, 1924.
I've been in your presence and my heart bleeds for you, the conduct you reflect. I've listened to your dirty language used to express yourselves when you could have expressed yourselves in good form. Can I appeal to the black manhood to turn over a new leaf? I'm ashamed of my black manhood, and what I've said to the black man, I also said to the black women. Your conduct is disgraceful. Young women whose personality spells respectability, at the least provocation, the filthy words they utter would almost make you turn and run away from them. A race that cannot conduct itself any better than that is bound to go down in defeat, is bound to go down in death, in hell, and in degradation. Your conduct is going to destroy you. You're driving your best friends away from you. Men will not respect you because you do not respect yourself. As I come in contact with my race from both...
Not even behind bars. Not even when our ancestor, not even when Marcus Mosiah Garvey was behind bars, could they have silenced this great man. They couldn't. Even while he was behind bars, he was speaking to the people. Even when he was behind bars, he was sending out messages of inspiration, of hope. Even when he was behind bars, there is nothing that they could have done to mute a Marcus Mosiah Garvey. The Negro will have to build his own government, industry, art, science, literature and culture before the world will stop to consider him. Tom's Prison, New York City, August 14, 1923.
Both a financial and social point of view, I realize how weak we are in the essentials that make for success. You are your worst enemy. The black man goes into business and tries to do the right thing, but what do we find? He gets no support from his fellow man. They lie on him, they rob him, and the next thing you hear, he's out of business, pulled down by you, his brothers. We have no faith and are dishonest to each other.
Great is the Lord and the company of him who established Zion in the earth. Cause your light to shine and justice sound, yo.
Rastafari!
There is no love for the man in black. See how we are struggling as strangers in a foreign clime, struggling in America, in Europe, in Asia, and in Africa, where men look upon us, not with love.
The government of the United States, along with the Federal Bureau of...
We did not came here of our own free will. We were brought here. And so the question of birth does not enter into the question. Look, family, this is what we're talking about, man. Here is Marcus Garvey telling a clown, like, speaking to politicians here today, saying to them, we were not born here. We didn't came here of our own free will and velocity. We didn't came here. We were forced here. We were brought here outside of our will. So the question of birth, were you born here in America, is null and void of law. You don't need to ask that question. You brought us here. We did not came here of our own free will. We were brought here. And so the question of birth does not enter into the question. From his closing address to the jury at his trial, New York City, June 15, 1923.
Of Investigations Director J. Edgar Hoover accused Marcus Garvey of using the U.S. mail to defraud. Garvey was put on trial.
After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury was called in by the eminent Jewish jurist Judge Mack and given a second set of instructions without their request. The gist of it was that if they had come back with a not guilty or hung jury, to remember the expense in which the government would be put, the public would have lost time, the court, the jury, and the witnesses would have to go through the entire exercise again. They went back into the jury room and 30 minutes later came back with a verdict. What I was concerned with was the truth. I asked no mercy, I asked no sympathy. I asked for justice based on the evidence given in the courtroom. I later found out that the judge wanted to speed things up because he had an appointment with the International Zionist Convention in Chicago. It was also due to the fact that I had acquired my first set of papers for naturalization, and they wanted to obstruct my quest for citizenship. In my closing statement, I told those 12 men that they were to judge a man by the testimony, by what had been brought into the case, by their judgment of what is wrong and what is right. You may condemn the body, but not the soul. It was not in their power to condemn the body. God condemns the soul. Judge me, and God will judge you for judging Marcus Garvey. The trial took 5.5 weeks, and every day I had a fight with the district attorney. As we went along, I realized it was impossible for me to escape the traps that were being laid out by the press, rival organizations, personal enemies, foreign governments who were interested in me being convicted. No one, not even the absent attorney, could have fought for me as I fought for myself, because he would have been risking the friendship and goodwill of the powerful influences that were aligned against me. There were several witnesses brought in by the government who probably because of a bribe would say anything the prosecutors told them to. For instance, Edgar Gray, a man with a superabundance of intelligence, could not say where he was really from. He claimed he was born in Sierra Leone, West Africa. That man was a coconut born in Antigua. Gray disappeared from the UNIA with funds of the organization, which he handled in my absence and for whom a warrant was out for his arrest. There was also Leo Healy. I regarded him as a friend. The very morning when he came in to testify, I met him outside, shook his hand, not knowing that he was there to testify against me. At one time he said I was a good man, then I was bad because I did not pay him the bills of the Black Star Line. Garvey was not the Black Star Line. We were not asking his opinion of the Star Line. We were asking his opinion of Marcus Garvey. He said understand that he believed that I was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Now he knows there ain't no black man a member of the KKK. Well, when we placed Mrs. Lawson on the witness stand, well, she wore dark glasses, obviously to obscure the movements of her eyes and her line of stare as she tried to communicate with the prosecutor.
Okay, family, we are coming to the final few minutes of our special tribute to Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We are coming to the final tribute, the final few minutes. Again, the second hour of the show gonna be going out to the survivors and victims of Hurricane Katrina. And if you wish to participate by calling in or by sharing your experience either pre or post Katrina, the telephone number is 504-303-8922. And look, for those of you who don't want to call in or still, hesitant in calling, you can leave your comment on Facebook. We will read it or we will share it with the listening audience.
During cross-examination, we asked her to show her subpoena. As she fumbled around and looked at the district attorney, lowering her head, waiting for his approval. She said she bought stock in 1917, even though the Black Star Line never sold stock in 1917. It was not in existence then. She claimed to be sick, as were two other witnesses who were able to make a quick $30 in the 5 minutes they spent on the stand. Prosecutor wanted to appeal to the sympathy of that jury. A young man named Cargill admitted on the stand to the dismay and disgust of the prosecutor that he was told what to say concerning the circulars and letters supposedly brought in as evidence in the case. Folks tried to misrepresent me and say that I do not like white people. Some of my best friends are white. The bishop, who was my friend since my youthful days, testified. When I asked him of his opinion of Marcus Garvey, he said, doubtful. They didn't understand what he meant. I was a public man. Opinions differ. Surely some men are doubtful of me and some are not. He didn't say that Garvey was doubtful. When I asked him for his personal opinion, the question was objected to and sustained by the judge, claiming that it was an improper question. There were some white-controlled newspapers who felt that I was railroaded. I remember one of them stated that my troubles began when I stepped on the toes of France and Great Britain, and that it was a very grave question whether justice had been in my case. After I was found guilty, they released me on $25,000 bail pending the hearing of the appeal. While
we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. All government of rights originate with the people, is founded on their will alone, and is instituted to protect the rights of the individual and for the good of the whole. Its only legitimate ends are to secure justice for all, preserve peace, protect the rights and promote the happiness and general welfare of the masses. Family, again, this second half of the program is dedicated to the victims, and I say victims, I use that word willfully and purposefully. If you don't consider yourself a victim, again, you can, this is a time in which you can let your voice be heard. But based on my experience, based on what I have seen post Katrina, I recognize that there's a lot of victims here. There's a lot of people who have been affected adversely post Katrina. There's a lot of people here who, because of no fault of their own, you know, the jury is still out whether or not a vast majority of the damage that occurred during Katrina occur naturally. The jury is still out on that. There's people who is talking. There's chatter among us that the levees that they claim was breached wasn't done because of the force of the water. The jury is still out on that. However, here it is, how many years now? 14 years post Katrina. And we are facing some issues. We are still facing some issues that you would think would be addressed by this point. There's issues that the people of New Orleans are facing that you would think would still be addressed. Now, again, this hour of the show is in honor or is in recognition of those who died, those who lost their life during Katrina, those who lost property, those who were displaced, those who had to leave New Orleans and call some other part of the country home. This show, this program, this hour is dedicated to you all. This hour is dedicated to those who stick around and who are still fighting the good fight. Again, if you choose to let your voice be heard, if you choose to share your story, the telephone number here is 504-303-8922.
Mississippi. New Orleans in peril. Friday, August 26th, 2005, 1:57 p.m. At the risk of being alarmist, we could be 3 to 4 days away from an unprecedented cataclysm that could kill as many as 100,000 people in New Orleans. Such a scenario is unlikely. The conditions would have to be just right, or rather, just wrong. There were forecasters out there, there were legitimate meteorologists who were saying this is a threat. And National Hurricane Center was saying there's a wide range of area that could be hit by this hurricane, ranging from the Florida Panhandle.
Kind of like the strength that it was building to.
Anytime a hurricane gets into the Gulf, we become very aware here in New Orleans. Friday morning I was in Detroit, and Saturday morning when I saw that the hurricane had reached Category 5, I began to call my family members and pretty much implored them to leave out of town.
I had flown in for the funeral of Clarence Barney, who had run the Urban League of Greater New Orleans. About 2/3 through the funeral, my communications director, Michelle Moore, who was with me, slipped me a note up at the front of the church, and the note said, "We must leave. The storm is a Category 5 now."
I was living in Metairie. I was living there with my ex-fiancée, her 3 kids and 2 grandchildren. Saturday before the hurricane, that morning at 11 a.m., I sent her 2 cars, all the kids, the grandkids, and 2 friends that come down from Illinois and sent them away to get to a safe spot.
I came down here that Saturday for vacation before I was going to work in Baltimore, and arrived, and at the airport everyone was just trying to get out. There was this huge exodus trying to happen, and I'm like, what's going on? And they said, oh, you didn't hear about the hurricane? And I actually hadn't been in touch with the news or the weather or whatever. So I came to my parents' house, and we just said, look, let's just wait.
I think it was probably about Saturday, about noon, they really started saying that it was going to come and hit us. And my house was kind of unprepared. I had stuff in the yard, windows needed to be boarded up, all of that, so I just started going to it.
I was here during Hurricane Katrina because my mother-in-law decided, as many New Orleanians did, that they could weather the storm. We haven't had a major hurricane since 1965. I remember I was 5 years old. It was called Hurricane Bessie. And I remember driving and water coming up behind us and surviving that. So I've always been afraid of hurricanes.
My mother, she had been bedridden for a while, so she was in good spirits. I told her, I said, well, another hurricane coming. She said, oh, yeah. She said, well, we survived Bessie. You remember that? I said, yeah, I remember that. I said, but I'm going to board up the windows and things, and I said, we're going to just try to survive it out.
On the 26th, as I recall, the governor and I had talked a little bit about this particular situation, and we were already in the mode of evacuating people.
I signed a declaration of emergency for the state of Louisiana to begin activating all of the assets that could be brought to bear so that we could petition the federal government to help us to also pay for the big things that needed to happen.
Katrina is now in the Gulf of Mexico and growing stronger rapidly after leaving at least 6 people dead in South Florida. Many heavily populated areas there are in deep water and without power.
New computer information just coming in tells us that now there's a possibility of the storm even shifting further west, perhaps even involving the New Orleans metropolitan area. Of course, New Orleans is one of the most vulnerable hurricane places, if not the most vulnerable in the country.
I was having dinner with my family, getting ready to evacuate them the next morning. Got a call from Max Mayfield. He said, Mr. Mayor, I am calling you. I just finished talking to the governor. This is one of the worst storms that I've ever seen in my 33-year history. The conditions are the worst I've seen, and this storm is one of the worst that I've seen. If I were you, I would issue a mandatory evacuation and try and get everybody out that you can, because this is the real deal.
This is very serious. This is the storm that everybody was afraid of. And when you get somebody like the head of the Hurricane Center to say that, in 33 years they hadn't seen anything like it, we should take heed to it.
The city of New Orleans had never in its history issued a mandatory evacuation. There's all sorts of legal concerns because you have so many residents who rely upon public transportation, and there's a question about whether you can really deliver on that order. I basically called my city attorney after that Saturday night conversation with Max Mayfield and said, I don't care what you have to do, figure out a way for us to order mandatory evacuation, and we did that the next morning.
I pretty much just disregarded the fact that Hurricane Katrina was headed towards New Orleans. A few of my friends seemed to be particularly worried, but I guess I'd been through enough of them that and I'd never particularly been very worried about it.
It was a Saturday night at 4 o'clock in the morning. I went to bed that night, and my son-in-law called me about 4 o'clock in the morning and said, father-in-law, you better get up and watch TV, and turned on Margaret Orr, and we watched her. And, when they showed you what was happening, that thing was covering the Gulf.
Hurricane Katrina will likely affect the Louisiana coast with tropical force winds and heavy rainfall by this evening. Governor Blanco and I, Mayor C. Ray Nagin, have each declared a state of emergency. Every person is hereby ordered to immediately evacuate the city of New Orleans.
Hurricane Katrina is now designated a Category 5 hurricane. We cannot stress enough the danger this hurricane poses to Gulf Coast communities. I urge all citizens to put their own safety and the safety of their families first by moving to safe ground.
My name is Tanya Harris, and I'm a Lower Ninth Ward resident. This is actually, it's 3 generations of us right here. This is my grandmother, Josephine Butler, and that's my mother, Cherry Harris. We evacuated the Sunday before the storm. My sister's van had broken down, and we all basically, she didn't want to leave. She just had no desire to leave because she, evacuating can get kind of costly. And a lot of times we always just leave and nothing happens. So she didn't want to leave, and my grandmother said, I think this is going to be a pretty strong storm, and, so I think we ought to get out of here. And my sister still wouldn't leave. But if one of us doesn't go, well, none of us will go. We all stay.
I told my car stick. I went around there. I said, y'all gonna leave out that house? I said, right now. I said, come on, get in the car. If you don't have anything, get in the car. Let's go. We got to go. So they got in the car. We all packed up in the car, and then we left.
We begin with 2 words coastal residents never want to hear. Category 5. Hurricane Katrina now threatens to bring catastrophic damage to coastal Louisiana and Mississippi. This monster of a storm is now at the most powerful level for a hurricane, and it's taking aim at a wide swath of the Gulf Coast. And that includes New Orleans, a city 6 feet below sea level.
When I heard the Category 5 was coming, I decided to evacuate. I took my entire family, and I went to North Louisiana and stayed with my brother.
They said, well, we got to leave. The hurricane coming. I said, listen, man, everybody who's afraid should leave, but I ain't for that leaving. I'm going to stay right here.
The main reason that I decided to leave is I hadn't gone shopping. I had intended to. So I was out of food, and I knew the grocery stores would be shutting down. I left late once I took a good look inside my icebox, and that was Sunday evening.
I had never evacuated from New Orleans for a hurricane. We've had others, and we didn't know how severe this one was going to be. But my wife and my sons convinced me, well, just leave the house and let's go downtown to a hotel, then you can come back tomorrow. So I said, fine, I'll do that.
The same thing was happening that happens with a lot of hurricanes coming to New Orleans. There's a group that says, I'm going to leave. You don't have to tell me twice. And then there's the other group that says, I rode out Betsy and I'm going to stay here and it's going to be okay.
We left the city that Sunday when they made it a mandatory evacuation. I was at a hotel right across the street from the convention center and the Superdome. Went to get my bags, and as I was driving back home to pick up my parents, there was lines of people already going into the Superdome. And they were holding them back, saying it's a place of last resort, so don't go yet. So people were just lined up like a parade, waiting for the Superdome to open to go into it.
As the storm was bearing down on us, we had opened up the Superdome for people with special needs, medical needs, which we always do. The Superdome is used because there's no other facility in the New Orleans area that is capable of sustaining winds higher than a Category 3 storm.
We have been very fortunate to get food for you tonight.
The mood in the beginning was kind of like, okay, we're okay. We was cheering when they were speaking, We was kind of excited to know they had food. We wanted to see the TVs and wanted to know what was going on with the news out there. And so everybody kind of like was kind of, I guess accepting, where they was at that particular time. The storm was coming.
7:38 this evening, we are continuing to track Hurricane Katrina as we are now starting to feel some of the effects of Katrina. This right here is a empty street here in New Orleans. It actually looks a little eerie, to see our city looking like this on a Sunday evening.
I started praying a lot, and I called my sister Cheryl in California. She could see the news because we had already lost power, so she could see the news in California on CNN, and she was giving me the update. But this was before it actually full-blown hit us. And she said, Phyllis, it's 30 minutes away. So I hang up, I'm praying. I'm getting my husband prayed up, I'm getting me prayed up. I'm like, Ron, you know what I never thought about? God's will. What if this is actually God's will for us to die right now, for this to be the time, for us to die like this?
We both know how to swim, but Jahir's a better swimmer than I am. And I talked to her about if the storm surge hit and we found ourselves in the water and having to swim, if she could get to safety, and if I was trailing behind her, to keep going. Don't worry about me. Get herself to safety. And she said, Mom, I wouldn't leave you, because we knew it was a life or death situation. The potential danger, the threat of the storm was enormous.
CNN is your hurricane headquarters. We are watching a Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, as it makes its way towards the city of New Orleans. Expected landfall about 5 to 8 a.m. tomorrow morning.
I wasn't in good physical condition, but it was about 12 o'clock before I left. And I really had anticipated not leaving the house. I was going to ride this one out. And but then I made a decision. I needed to go up to the complex. So I asked my wife, but after I got in the car, I told her we only live about.
Again, family, we are paying our respect to those who survived Hurricane Katrina, those who lived through Hurricane Katrina. We are at the 14-year mark. And just to think about the trauma, just to think about that whole experience, that human feeling, that human experience that people had to go through, just to think about the human side of it. Put everything else away for a second and just think about the state of minds of, our fellow New Orleans, thinking about all this water coming in, thinking about the reports that's coming in from these major news facilities and, these news stations talking about the wind, the water, things that can happen. Just thinking about that, right? You have individuals thinking about, look, the elderly parents, or the elderly family members, people thinking that, look, we don't know how to swim, just these different, thinking process that, going through people's mind. You got people who actually went through that experience and lost loved ones. Again, you are listening to The Proven Truth. You are listening to The Proven Truth with your brother and host, Anthony Brown. If you wish to share your experience like these other people, these people are sharing their experience. If you need to share your experience with us personally, you can do so by calling us here, 504-303-8922. Again, this is just we showing our, respect to those who actually, The Proven Truth.
Anthony, this is Mike Howells.
How you doing, Mike?
And just wanted to thank you very much for the shows you've done today. Of course, the Marcus Garvey, which is very good and insightful. But being a Katrina survivor, I am especially appreciative of your show giving an insight into what people endured. Right. That now you're talking about, or at least I've heard a lot of talk about, the evening when it struck and right before, and I was in New Orleans the whole time. One of those people who never left the city. There aren't many of us.
Wow, you mean you stay here, Mike?
I remember this. Yeah.
You stayed, okay.
I remember the stress, the strain, the fear, and the uncertainty, which it's always hard to handle uncertainty, before the storm landed.
Right.
And before the flooding occurred. And I remember we had a radio, and it was battery operated, and so it operated after the the electricity went out.
Okay.
But I remember, I think it was before the electricity went out, we heard that there were people lined up outside the Superdome.
Okay.
And the winds were just starting to come in from the hurricane. And I thought, wow, it's pretty intense to have people out there. Right. But like a lot of other Katrina survivors who were in New Orleans, I thought, well, I've been here so many years, that case 22 years, that it would be okay. But it was still disconcerting And the place I was in, it was in the quarter, so it didn't flood.
Right.
But the windows, right where I was sleeping, they kind of shattered, and the glass started flying. And, you know, that really kind of added to the sense of stress.
Right.
And, you know, kind of losing control. But I'm glad you bring this up, because right now there's a majority of the people in this city, you know, are Katrina survivors. And yet, for the most part, we're just being ignored. And a lot of Katrina survivors are poor working class people.
Right.
And it's good that somebody, you know, reaches out and tries to communicate with us or get our feelings across, because it's pretty clear the city hall isn't doing that.
Right, right.
They've no parade, no nothing for this 14th anniversary. And a lot of the people who are the so-called leaders of the progressive community, many of them who weren't even here when the storm hit, have, you know, treated us like, well, that's yesterday's newspapers.
Right.
But it isn't yesterday's news when it comes to the issue of, we have, of course, there's the emotional issue. So many of us have PTSD and depression, Katrina-related PTSD and depression. There are many road home people who still haven't gotten the money to rebuild their home.
Right.
And then there's the people who, you know, like I'm most familiar with public housing and that struggle. And those people, you know, many have never had a chance to come back because they've never been able to manage to get together the resources.
Right.
And so they were told, you know, if the things are okay after the storm, you can come back if the building's not destroyed. But it didn't matter whether the building they were staying in was destroyed or not. They weren't allowed to come home.
Right.
And so that's, you know, that denial of the right of return is an emotional pain that eats away at people over the years. It's telling us, you know, you're just rejected from the place where you grew up in.
Right.
And because you're, quote, undesirable. And that's the message. And so it's important for people to understand that's still on people's minds. There's still people, and it isn't just a mental health issue, there's still people who are, you know, in the economic hole because of Katrina and that so-called assistance they gave people afterwards, which was woefully inadequate at best. And you know, the elites of this city can do whatever they want, and their lackeys in the nonprofit industry and their political hacks can do whatever they want. But everyone who's a Katrina survivor in this town, and they're going to be thinking about Katrina and issues that sprung out of Katrina. And yet we will have a media, and we will have a local government, and there are exceptions in the media like yourself, that will just ignore it or just treat it as, okay, today's the 14th anniversary of Katrina, and maybe give it 2 seconds on the news. And that's the sum total. And it's just a really callous disrespect for what was not just the suffering of the Katrina survivors, but for historically what was certainly the single most important event in reshaping New Orleans as we live in it today.
Right.
And and to pretend that it didn't happen, and to pretend that the so-called Katrina recovery after it, which was basically used as a mass looting, not basically our public services, selling them off for a song, or contractor bids like with Kathleen Blanco shutting down Charity Hospital so she could, even though they could have easily reopened it, so she could give her contractor cronies a free contract to build a new medical center. And that meant 10 years. 10 years, people with it. New Orleans was effectively a healthcare desert. I mean, we had some other facilities, but especially in the area of mental health care. The closure of Charity, which I think had like 80% of the beds, mental health care beds in the city, the closure of Charity meant that the Katrina survivors had no real chance getting this kind of needs, their physical needs and their psychological needs met. Right. And they had to just improvise at a time when they weren't in any condition to improvise, in a time when they weren't ready to handle these big changes. That could have brought stability, but Kathleen Blanco, to pay off her crony fans, shut it down.
Right.
And then we've got so many other messes that went along with it. I've talked about the public housing and the road home, but then there's the teachers union.
Right.
They broke the union with a contract. Kathleen Blanco signed this law in November 2005, and overnight 8,000 people lost their jobs, and their contract was destroyed. And if you don't have work, your ability to come home is severely compromised. And these were people who were not just individuals, but they ran families, even extended families. Talked about the older people. They provided for loved ones, but they no longer had a job, and they were no longer able to kind of carry the load because they privatized the school system.
Right.
I mean, this city is, the carnage that was inflicted, emotional as well as physical, in a short time, is just mind-boggling.
Right.
And now that the whole idea is, let's just ignore it. That's what the 14th anniversary is about, as far as the people who run the city.
Right.
Let's just ignore it. I mean, it's torturous for a lot of the Katrina survivors.
Right. Well, Mike, look, I know you, just like many other Katrina survivors, still going through some psychological, physical, mental, and financial, struggle, based on what occurred post Katrina. But my brother, it's just one thing I want to say to you, is that I'm glad that you made it through Katrina.
Right.
You didn't lose life. I'm glad you're still here with us, and I'm glad you still have the will to fight. To keep on fighting, and not only to keep on fighting, but to keep on putting a voice on issues like this. Because if Katrina had taken you away, my brother, I wouldn't have the privilege, to meet a warrior or a champion like you. So I'm just glad you're still around, even though there's still a lot more work to be done. You know what I'm saying? I'm just glad you're still here.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Man.
I just wanted to add one thing, and this would be for for everybody, but especially for the Katrina survivors.
Okay.
Kim Ford is been working on having an anniversary, a commemoration.
Okay.
Because she, being a Katrina survivor, knows full well where Katrina survivors are at on every anniversary psychologically.
Right.
And she just informed me that there will be a vigil, candlelight vigil, for the 14th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina.
Okay.
And this is for a way for Katrina survivors and those who support them to have some recognition and try to find some solace and being together.
Okay.
And everyone's invited, but this will be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Andrew Sanchez Community Center.
Okay.
And there'll be a candlelight vigil for those who survived and those who didn't.
Right.
And I just wanted to invite all the listeners.
Okay.
To this event. It's at 1616 Catherine Street in the lower 9th Ward.
When is this?
Kim did try to get the mayor to support this, but the mayor blew her off and told her to meet with some staff member on September 9th, which, as you know, I've talked to you about this before, I think, on this show.
When will this be, Mike? When will this candle vigil be? What date?
Okay, this will be Thursday, August 29th.
Oh, 29th.
Thursday, August 29th.
Okay.
And that will be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay.
At the Andrew Sanchez Community Center.
Okay.
The Andrew Sanchez Community Center.
Right.
And that's 1616 Catherine. in the lower Ninth Ward.
Okay,
16 Catholic.
No doubt we'll be getting some literature and that, some publication and that, so we can repeat it to our listening audience and maybe publicize it. No doubt Kim will be sending something over to us, or yourself can do it, and we'll actually share it with the listening audience.
Okay then. Well, thank you very much.
Sure,
okay?
My brother. All right, thanks, man. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
A block away from the levee that surrounds the Chalmette back levee that surrounds St. Bernard, in the area I live in is Verrett. I told my wife just to take the back road, and she asked me why. I said, well, it's a scenic route, and I said, I just want you to look at it and just remember, I said, because if this thing hits, that's all you'll have is memories of this place.
Well, everybody left. I went out, ran 10 miles, came back, boarded up my house, called my man. We went to the hospital to see my brother, and then we went up to the Hyatt, parked the car, went up to the 27th floor. About 11:30, guy came on the PA system, says, everybody place your belongings in the bathrooms, grab your spread, your pillow, and come to the 4th floor ballroom. I guess about 2:30 in the morning, it got rough.
Listening to the wind, and that sound, I'll never forget that sound of wind hitting the glass at the Hyatt, and those glasses started breaking, and that's when you could see the true power of Mother Nature.
The winds woke me up, and I got up and looked outside and saw trees in the courtyard across me just like swaying.
You can hear the squall through the window going like a tornado. I thought a tornado was by the hospital. It was so loud. Moved all our patients out into the hallway because we didn't want any windows cracking on them, any windows breaking.
This is August 29th, 2005. About 6 in the morning, everybody kind of...
Again, this is in tribute to the 14-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. This is actually our way of paying our respects to those who lost their life through Hurricane Katrina, those who lost property, those who lost friends, those who lost their sanity, those who are still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And again, for those of you who are listening to us and want to participate, want to tell your side of the story, you can call us here at 504-303-8922. Again, that telephone number is 504-303-8922. You can let us know, if you stay here, if you stayed here through Hurricane Katrina, if you had evacuated, if you lost property, if you lost loved ones, you can, if you choose, you can share your story. But again, this last hour is our way of remembering the people we lost during Hurricane Katrina, the properties, the way of life that was lost by our fellow New Orleans, our fellow Louisians. This is our way of paying some type of tribute in this 14-year post-Hurricane Katrina.
I'm sleeping, and then all of a sudden you just hear...
It sounded like a New York City subway train. Others said they thought it was thunder or someone hammering, and in a way it was. It was Katrina hammering away at the roof trying to get in. And then this, the first break visible in the roof. That is daylight coming through, and the rain soon followed.
There are reports about the Superdome. Some reports that we have gotten from people in the dome tell us that there has been a portion of the roof that is leaking. The structure is sound. Right now, there is no structural damage. They have moved the people who were on the floor of the Superdome in a very orderly fashion to get them out of the water that's coming through. Now, having said that, we have several more hours to go watching the situation, and the rains are pretty heavy.
Is rolling. It's rolling too much. I mean, there's tin flying off this. Everything is ripping the whole aluminum siding of the building off. You can actually hear it being peeled like somebody. It's just like that Daryl Hannah movie from a long time ago, the 50-foot woman or whatever the hell she was. That's what Katrina was. She was peeling our shit apart.
I mean, it was just incredible, the sound. It was like having a freight train in your ear for hours on end. It's just almost, you can't describe it because it's deafening. You can't even hear yourself think after a while.
And all I could think of was one word, and I said it out loud. And I remember my daughter looking at me like, what is she saying? But all I could say was stabilize. I just wanted the winds in the house to stop shaking and to stabilize.
Man, I don't know whether that water's coming over that levee or what.
The storm missed us.
I can't hear you.
The storm went east.
So you haven't heard about that water coming over that levee from the lake?
No. Check it out.
Because the water started rising so high on my two-story apartment, I had to get out, man.
Where's that at?
Right across the Lord Robinson overpass.
Okay.
Around Fluid on the Weezer Street.
Around 9 o'clock, we heard a big boom noise. Boom! And it was loud, loud, loud.
Yes, I heard the explosion. We heard it first, the echo from here. Then it was here. I said, oh my God, it's the end of the world.
We heard some explosions, 2, 3. We thought about, I thought maybe it was an electrical transformer or something popping in the distance.
First I heard one boom, I thought a big transformer. Because Freddie said, it's a transformer. But I said, we've been sitting in the door now for about 2 hours, 3 hours. But it went again. Boom, boom.
I think the lever cracked, and they helped it the rest of the week. They had a bomb. They bombed that sucker.
I didn't only hear the explosion, I felt the explosion.
Now, family, let me interrupt this recording for a second. Now, as I stated earlier, based on eyewitness evidence, okay? Based on eyewitness evidence or testimony, as you just hear from this resident here in New Orleans, they were out of power for hours. There wasn't no power, there wasn't no light or anything like that. And numerous people make the argument that the explosion, there's this big boom or this big explosion, and it wasn't like they hear it one time or two times, right? And again, there's an argument to be made, or there's an argument out there that some of the damage that occurred, some of the property that was lost, some of the flooding that occurred during Hurricane Katrina is not as a direct result of Hurricane Katrina. At one point, the argument was that the blunt of Hurricane Katrina missed the city of New Orleans. But some way, somehow, it turns and it came back around, and the force of the water and the wind hit the levees and break the levees. But again, there are people who were actually here during Hurricane Katrina saying that, look, we hear these explosions, and at one point we think that these explosions could have been transformers, but come to think about it, by this time we were out of power for many hours, and by this time the substations was down. So hearing these explosions is questionable, to say the least.
And it should be somebody else heard and felt the explosion besides me.
I don't believe that the levees were blown. I believe that my people heard explosions. When water gushed through a gaping hole, you have a crack that go from being a crack to a gaping hole, you're going to hear some type of sound. The levees gave.
I don't think it was blown up, I'll be honest with you. I think what they heard was there was a possibility they could have heard the snapping of the ropes that hold these barges together. I almost have to believe that they heard the barge hit that concrete wall, because it just looks to me like that barge was the thing that knocked that wall down.
I'm 45 years old. I'm a New Orleans native. I've been in New Orleans all my life. My mother was born in New Orleans. My father was born in New Orleans. My grandmother was born in New Orleans. And I was there when Hurricane Bessie hit.
In 1965, during Hurricane Betsy, there was an intentional dynamite of the levees, and that caused the lower Ninth Ward to flood. People were on their roofs. Several people lost their lives. They dynamited the levees and flooded the lower Ninth Ward in order to save some of the more expensive property in the lakefront area.
They're not going to never leave nothing happen to this French Quarter. Okay, nothing ain't going to happen. If the French Quarter go, everything go. They blew that levee so the water could release on that side of the city.
During Hurricane Betsy, there were rumors, and it became almost an article of faith with people in the community that the Ninth Ward flooded because there was an intentional breach of the levee. It was never investigated. It was neither proven nor disproven. In this case, for the government and others to sort of dismiss it without looking into all of it is not doing the people or the public a service.
These people that live along where it flooded, that believe it was dynamited, have a long experience of being ripped off. The 1927 flood, when black communities were dynamited, what happened during Betsy was on their mind. It's not a far jump to believe the urban myth that it got dynamited.
I think there are too many similarities between the 1927 flood and Katrina. For one thing, the levee policy of the federal government, the flood protection policy of the federal government was, directly responsible. I mean, it was deeply flawed in 1927 and had been widely criticized. The city of New Orleans it exercised its political muscle and dynamited the levee outside the city, flooded out its neighbors. And this wasn't about race, it was about money. The people who were flooded out of their homes were in St. Bernard Parish. They were almost all of them were white. So as I say, it had nothing about race. It was an enormous event. It flooded the homes of over 1 million people, which back then was almost 1% of the entire population of the United States. In Louisiana alone, there were 200,000 people who were fed by the Red Cross for months after the flood. More than half of them were living in tent cities. Until Katrina, it was the greatest natural disaster the country had ever seen.
2 years ago, FEMA actually funded a study called PAM, where they did a study, a numerical study, computer simulation model of what had happened if a Hurricane 5, Category 5, hit New Orleans.
Hurricane Pam was a fictitious hurricane engineers and the Federal Emergency Management Agencies designed to see what happens if we flood New Orleans. What we are looking at here is as storm moved toward New Orleans, it started to flood New Orleans from east and west and eventually enter Bowl gets flooded.
Hurricane Pam came up with some very, very significant findings, and unfortunately these seem to have been ignored by many, many agencies as we move forward. One of the most significant was that we had identified through our own research that there were 127,000 people in New Orleans who didn't have access to motor vehicles. In addition, there were a large number of homeless and the disabled. So you were talking about a significant percentage of the population that couldn't evacuate.
In 1965, they started those levees. They haven't finished them today, and that's 40-something years later. They haven't put the last lift on these levees. You know, it's like the guy that used to get up there with, years back, they'd hold that oil filter in his hand and say, pay me now, pay me later. Well, this is the pay me later. This is the payback.
It's like, oh, it costs too much money. Now they failed, and now they look how much money they got to spend. You know, the old saying, a stitch in time. Well, we don't deal that way. We said if we look the other way, it'll go away. And now it's just coming back home to roost, you know. All the stuff they've done for the last 40 years came home in a big way.
President Hoover in 1947, in a famous speech about engineers, he said that engineering is a great profession. He said, but engineers, we build stuff. He said politicians may put their name on it, but we can't deny that we did it. He said an engineer is unlike a doctor who can bury his mistakes. He said an engineer is unlike a politician who can blame it on his opponent on the opposite side of the aisle, or hope that the public forgets. He said an engineer is unlike a lawyer who can blame it on a judge or try to argue it away. He said an engineer is unlike an architect who can hide his mistakes with trees and shrubbery. He said when an engineer makes a mistake, he is damned because his mistake is there for the world to see.
The engineer should have designed those much better and much stronger, and we haven't seen that. As for example, 17th Street Canal, the sheet pile was too shallow and didn't go all the way it should go. In St. Bernard Parish, where the levee over top, levee material was not strong enough, and those were not armored.
My understanding is people think we got hit by a hurricane. We got missed by a hurricane. Hurricane went east. When the water backed up the lake, my understanding is the lake backed up a Category 1 into our levees, and they failed. Not Category 3. Category 3 came up the Industrial Canal and the MRGO, breached the levees, topped the levees, but the two main ones that broke under Category 1. Category 2 tops. So we've been lied to all these years by the federal government.
And it cost the people, not just New Orleans and the Ninth Ward, but the whole freaking Southeast Louisiana. It cost the people their homes and their lives. I hope the politicians, or whoever they did this, the Corps of Engineers, whoever's responsible, I hope that they can sleep at night. I hope they can sleep at night, knowing that they're the ones who's responsible. And that's not this talking. That's the freaking truth.
Let's go to Anita in Uptown. Anita, are you seeing any water in the streets where you are now?
Yes, it's actually up to the top step. And we have...
How many steps do you have?
We only have 4. And we have 12 people in the house, including the senior citizen and 2 babies.
I walked over to the sewer drain, storm drains on the side of the street, and I could hear this low, rumbling gurgle coming at me. It sounded like just bubble and boil, and it just spit out all over my shoes. Then I started hearing clang, clang, clang down the street, and it was the manhole covers popping off, and the water was just blowing out the manhole covers, and it was coming out of the storm drains, and it was filling up. And you could see it coming down the side streets. You know, it wasn't like a wall of water, but it was coming out quick, and you could see it was starting to rise up real quick.
Judy come and woke me up and says, hey, go out and look at the street. When I went and looked at the street, the water was pouring in. I run back in the house, told them to put on their life jackets and everything. We had to get out the house.
And Henry was trying to open the back door for us to get out of the house because the water was coming up so quickly. It was up to the window.
I got up and I went to my front door, and I had water up over my head. If I'd have stepped out on my step, I'd have drowned.
Again, family, you're listening to The Proven Truth. You're listening to The Proven Truth with your brother and host, Anthony Brown. Coming to you live from the studios of Radio Gumbo Creole in the beautiful territory of New Orleans, Louisiana. To participate in the show, to let your voice be heard, the telephone number is 504-303-8922. That's 504-303-8922. Look, this is our way of paying tribute, of honoring those who lost life, those who lost property, those who lost loved one, those who are still going through that emotional stress. Post-Katrina, those who feel like the powers that be did not do enough to address certain concerns or certain issues. We are now in the 14th anniversary of Katrina, post-Katrina. And, you know, we need to keep those who lost life, those who lost property, those who still going through that emotional stress, PTD, or whatever label you want to put on it. You know, we still need to recognize and honor those people. And this is our way, this is our contribution. This is we saying to the people of New Orleans that we love you. This is we saying to the people of Louisiana that we love you. And look, we know that for those of you who did not retreat, for those of you who did not leave when the warning came, or for those of you who left when the warning came and couldn't come back or still haven't returned, we still have you guys in our heart, in our thoughts, in our prayers, and we're just saying much love.
I'm gonna throw your life preserver, okay? There it is, you see it? Put your feet on anything. Go for that life preserver right there. Don't let it drift away from you. Where's that life jacket? All right, take the life jacket. Now the water's gonna be deep. Come on, man.
Come on, you can do it. Let go. Let go. Come on.
Yes, you can.
The life preserver.
Don't panic. Don't panic. Just come to us. Once you get to us, we can get you into the boat. Come on. There you go. Don't panic. Don't panic. Just go right on the top of that.
I went out on the second floor porch to look over and see the water just kept rising and kept rising. So I went in the room and I broke down, got on my knees, and I started praying. And I was like, I'm not gonna let nobody die. So I gotta get myself together and get my mind right to focus on how I'm gonna do this here.
So I'm steady dialing on my cell phone 911. You can't get through, you can't get through. I got so desperate and lost a sense of intelligence that I dialed 0 for the operator and asked her could she transfer me to 911. She said, I can't do it. I said, why not? She said, because they're not taking any calls. What do you mean they're not taking any calls? I'm dying. I'm fucking dying in here. We're about to fucking drown because I'm here in the water. And I'm sorry for cursing, but the more I think about it, the more angry I get because I'm like, here talking to you. So if you can hear my voice talking to you, then you know a heart must be beating inside of a body, which means there's a life here. So you mean you can't connect me, even though I know they told me, if you stayed, we're not going to help you. They told me point blank, channel after channel saying, fill your tub up with water so you can flush the damn toilet if you survive this.
My family and I are stranded here along with about 100 other tenants and their families. The street water, we have been monitoring it all day on the front of Gravier, is increasingly rising, and it's now coming through the lobby door, and it's filling up the basement, and I expect that our lobby is going to fill up, and we have...
Look, family, we appreciate the fact that you guys tune in today and spend some time with us. We appreciate the fact that you guys tune in and spend some time with us. You know, for those of you who stay for the full 2 hours, we appreciate that. The first hour of this show we dedicated to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the work, the sacrifice of that ancestors. This past Saturday was actually the birth date of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. If he was alive today, he would have been a 132-year-old. We take the first hour of this show and just to pay our respects, just to keep his name alive on the forefront, just to do our part so that generations to come will remember or should have something to look back on and to do some research into who was Marcus Garvey, what did he stand for, what was his contribution to mankind, to the human race, to black people, what was his argument to black people about Mother Africa, about upward mobility. For those of you who participated, for those of you who stick around, much love. The last hour of this show is to our fellow brothers and sisters right here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Those of you who went through the most horrific natural disaster known to man, are the replica of a natural disaster known to man. Because again, the jury is still out whether or not the damage sustained because of Katrina was actually sustained because of Katrina. When we hear the fact that governmental officials did a study, and the fact that did a study and a replica of what would happen to New Orleans should a Category 4 hurricane hit New Orleans. They did a study. So they were fully aware that if a Category 4 or 5 hurricane hit New Orleans, what would be the devastation based on the study. When they take certain things into fact, like they know how many people living here in New Orleans didn't have transportation. They knew how many people were homeless. They knew other factors. When you hear first-hand testimony of people that, look, during Hurricane Katrina, we heard boom, explosion. When you know the history, when you know what happened back in the 1920s and in 1965, that they actually dynamite certain parts of New Orleans to save certain parts of New Orleans, it's not far-fetched the argument to believe that this, in 2005, they actually did it again. Now, again, family, this show wasn't meant to point fingers or to call out the fact that the government as you know it commit atrocities on the people of New Orleans. This is to reach out to our fellow brothers and sisters, our fellow New Orleans, our fellow Louisianians, just to show them that, look, we ain't forget about you, we still love you, and we are here.
Has nowhere to go.
This is actually the first pumping station built in New Orleans, right here. It was built here because this is the lowest area in the city. There are about 27 pumping stations, and we were one of the last ones to shut down here. When the levee broke, when it got to